Good morning, everyone. Let's see if you can complete this sentence. It's a refrain from an old song, but I bet there'll be a number of you that get it. It's only one word that you have, so it's return to sender. Return to sender. The rest of it is address unknown. Well, we know the address in a manner of speaking. Return to sender. So something to keep in mind this week as we meditate on the gospel and what God has really given us an opportunity to think about, to pray about, and to continue to grow and advance down that path of greatness. Return to sender. Now, before we get into that, let's review just a little bit from last week. Remember, we heard Jesus give us that parable where really there was a certain people that were invited. It was the chosen people of Israel. And there were difficulties there, and so he extended that invitation to everyone. Everyone is invited. Okay, this is a manifestation of God's mercy, and it's also a manifestation of a certain predestination that we all have. We're predestined to go to heaven. Okay, doesn't happen automatically, but that's what God's desire is for each and every human being, created in the image and likeness of God. So his mercy extends to everyone, and that was seen in the parable of the invitation to the wedding feast. Everyone was invited. Now, just because you're invited doesn't mean that you stay. In a sense, he came across an individual that showed up without a wedding garment. Now, there's a presupposition there within the parable. The person had access to a wedding garment. They could have easily put on the wedding garment, but they showed up. They showed up at the wedding feast without one, without the wedding garment. And the master came over and said, "How are you here without a wedding garment?" And he quickly got the attention of his attendants and said, "Bind him hand and foot and throw him out where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth." And many are invited, but few are chosen. And the disposition here is that one would have a heart of generosity. It's best or easiest seen in this, and this is what I unfolded for us last week. It's like coming to God and saying, "Oh, by the way, you're welcome," rather than a sincere and deep thank you from our hearts. So that's what that individual, they were invited. They knew that they were to show up in a wedding garment, but they were like, "You're welcome," because so many other people didn't even show up. I showed up. Yeah, I don't have a wedding garment, and I knew that that was wrong, but by the way, you're welcome that I showed up. And this is an opportunity. It's not a time for shaming. It's not a time for feeling bad. It's a time for insight. See, because what God wants is He wants us to find what He's given in our heart to give, and then to give it. And as the scriptures say, and we hear St. Francis quoted so often, it's better to give than it is to receive. In other words, when we find something that's truly in our heart to give and we give it, and it's really from God, then that itself, the giving itself, is a joy. The giving in of itself, it changes us and makes us more what we're supposed to be. And that good sacrifice also brings forth life in others. And when that happens, sincerely, then we turn to God and say, "Well, thank you. Thank you for the capacity to give." So, that's the experience there, rather than "you're welcome." Now, with God, it's crystal clear. With human beings, See, because with God, when I say it's crystal clear, I mean He gives us everything, and we struggle along the path to try and return to Him something good. In our human relationships, there should be a reciprocity in love, and so there can be some difficulties there. You ever do that? Your spouses, any of you spouses, you ever say, turn to your spouse and say, "You're welcome"? No? Oh, really? How about parents to children or children to parents? Children, do you ever say, "I did this, and by the way, Dad, you're welcome"? How about children to grandparents or grandparents to children, grandchildren? They turn to their grandchildren and say, "You know what? You're welcome. I did this for you." It's okay. In our humanity, sometimes we'll do this. That lacks. There's a lack in that gift. If that's happening, it's really limping. That's good that you gave. And there still can be fruit from that. But if our inward disposition is saying, "Oh, well, by the way, you're welcome that I came to Mass. You're welcome that I donated this or gave my time or this type of thing." It's good that we gave, but there's something not right there. See, because He places it in our heart to give. And when we give it, a good sacrifice, it brings forth life in us and in others. That segues right into where we're going today. Return to sender. Return to sender. What are we returning here? Well, Jesus says He's trying to be entrapped by the Pharisees. And He takes out the coin and He says, "Well, whose image is this?" "Oh, it's Caesar." "Well, then return to Caesar. It's his image. Return it to him. But return to God what is God's." Who or what has the image of God? You. You and me. Imprinted in us. We have the image of God. Remember, we are made in the image and likeness of God. We have an intellect to know the truth. We have a will to choose it. He's created a situation where we could be like God. That is to say that we take possession of ourselves and we make a good sacrifice, and that good sacrifice brings forth life in the community and in us. Return to sender. That is to say, our week should be filled with little epiphanies, realizations that I am returning this gift of the image of God within myself, the image of love. Remember, the Trinity is a perfect exchange of love. That image that I find in myself, and I give it back. That's what He's saying. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God's. God has placed this image in you and me, and give it back. Okay, St. Irenaeus says the glory of God is the person that is fully alive. That is what God wants for us. That is part of our advancement down the path of greatness, is finding that, what He has placed in our heart, and giving it back. This image. It comes in a very familiar fashion. So time, talent, treasure. We look at treasure, and there's this sense of, the litmus test is the tithe. And again, we're like, "Oh, well, it's just the church trying to get money." No, I'm not saying tithe to the church. It's taking the gift that we have and saying, "I'll live on 90%, and I'm going to give away 10. Some to the church, some here, some there." I'm not talking about giving to family, not to the children or the grandchildren. I'm talking about giving it in charity to God. Ooh, I don't know, Father, that's tough. It's a process of coming so that we get to a point where we're no longer possessed by our possessions. Okay, so I'm not saying, well, if you're not giving tithe, you're bad. I am saying that you're not as free as you really can be. And that God wants us to truly be free, to be able to live on 90% of what He gives us. and to take 10% and give it away. What a joy it is to get to a point where you're not possessed by your possessions and to give. You give more than 10%, that's almsgiving. The image of God returning to Him. Time. When you think about it, well, 10% of my time, well, let's say that everybody gets 8 hours of sleep. I won't ask you to raise your hand. Who doesn't get 8 hours of sleep? That's all right, though. You should. At least that's what the studies say. You should get some good sleep. It's good for our health. So let's say we get our 8 hours, and so that's 16 hours or 960 minutes, or basically an hour and 36 minutes that we give back to God. That's 10%. Now, I'm not saying that we have to spend 1 hour and 36 minutes in prayer, but think about it. How much of that tithe of your time every day is in prayer? 2 minutes? 15? 30? Maybe come to daily mass? I don't know. Pray the rosary? It doesn't have to all be in prayer. Maybe it's just simply bringing to mind God throughout the day. But it's a certain point of ourselves, of this image of God that He's placed in us, and we're returning it to Him every single day. And that sense of coming to our Creator and returning it to Him. And again, it's not a line to cross. It's not it's not this hoop to jump through, okay, and say, oh, well, now I'm okay. Now I can feel good because somebody said I need to do this. It's not a mental gymnastic. It's the very substance of how we were created. That we realize this image in which we have been created, we return to the Creator, that there is where we experience life to the full. So what are we doing with those 96 minutes that are supposed to be God's? So we have time, we have treasure. What about talent? So how are we giving back to God in a particular way? And when I think about this, I look out and I see those sidewalks in the streets. We were able to do that for $90,000. It should have cost twice that much. And the reason why it only cost that much is because people stepped forward and they said, oh, I'm only going to charge this much. I have talent and with regards to cement. I have resources, I'm going to give those. There are people that said, I'm going to come out with my shovel and I'm going to shovel the dirt in there and make it all, set and ready to go. Could have been a lot of labor there that would have cost us. There's outlets here that have just been replaced by electricians who didn't charge a thing. There are welders that have stepped forward and said, oh, that welding needs to be done, on this porch. I'll go and I'll figure out. I'm going to rent the equipment. I don't know how to weld. I don't know what it takes. Anybody know how to weld around here? No? So, people that step forward and giving of their talent. And it's a joy. It's a joy. It's returning the image back to the Creator. And that's what He wants. Well, I kind of feel a little bad when you say that, Father. Nope. That's not where we're going. It's not about feeling bad. It's about seeing with a different clarity and saying, wow, this image in which I am created, this image is of a self-gift. That's the image of the Trinity, by the way. The Father takes possession, gives Himself to the Son. The Son receives Himself from the Father, gives Himself completely back to the Father. And this eternal exchange of love is so substantial, it's another person. It's a perfect exchange of sacrifice in love. That is the image in which you and I have been created. And that is the image in which we feel full and fulfilled when I'm possessing myself, the gifts and talents, and giving it back. Let's think about that throughout this week. Return to